So Jittasubha's little reflection on dana has stimulated some thoughts in my mind. Just as, because one of the things I think is, certainly just that sense of allowing space for generosity is such a counterpoint to the kind of negativity and fear that is so prevalent in our culture and society, and in the human condition. I mean, generally. I mean, the Buddha, again, the Buddha nailed it a long time ago. But the that sense of especially relevant today in a kind of modern, fast-paced culture, wherever it is. I mean, even Thailand's modern and fast-paced. It's not pastoral at all these days. I mean, there are little pockets, but the that sense of the. But of course, that dana pervades the culture, even though it is really fast-paced, and to a certain degree, it kind of helps take the edge off that kind of fast pace, because there are. But I think also it's again the way that the Buddha established things, and I mentioned it at the meal yesterday, where, say, as monks, we're not allowed to ask for basically anything, and lay people can make invitation, so that we can make our needs known, but in general, the standard is to be patient and wait for whatever you need, and the reality is people rise to that occasion, and certainly seen that in establishing monastery in America. I've been, Bhaigiri was established in 1996, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but we felt we just wanted to bring the tradition to America, to Northern California, and we did. It was sort of, well, we'll see what happens. And I'd say it was a successful experiment. The monastery is functioning, it's thriving, and it's been really interesting interacting with like local tradesmen and contractors, and how they enjoy. Like we had our contractor passed away a couple of years ago, and we wanted to do something for his wife and his children. It was like make a picture book of his, because he worked with us for many years and was instrumental in the implementation of a huge portion of the construction, and he really he didn't know us from Adam, because we just kind of cold called. Well, we got recommended many contractors, which is another story. Like our project manager was somebody who was recommended to us, he'd been formerly the mayor of a local town nearby. He was very much a local, and and pretty kind of straight. And he really enjoyed working with us, although at first it was still a bit of a uncertainty. But I think that kind of generosity, these people really have looked after us over the years, and we've got a great relationship with the county because, one, everything's done out in the open. We're not trying to hide things, mostly. It is the real world, after all. But but they really, and then they saw how the monastery worked, because for a contractor you want to have schedules and whatnot, and same with the architect. And we had this when we were doing this book for her and her husband have a firm in Berkeley, and we originally didn't want to. We think, well, a Berkeley architect, that's big money, and I don't think we can afford that. But then we realized that they had the best ideas, and it was so we ended up going with them. But they, and that was over many years, probably 15, almost 20 years, close to 20 years connection. And they said that's. They both retired now, but she was the main force for design. And they said, just the connection with the monasteries was the highlight of their career. It's very touching. But it was getting used to the fact that we couldn't really commit to a clear schedule of building. Because we had to go with what money was in the bank, and that was never a sure thing. And sometimes we had to stop construction. You would, because we don't borrow money. I mean, banks wouldn't lend to a monastery anyway, but but still, you don't borrow money. It's on principle, and you wait for people's generosity. And when it's sufficient to go to sections and phases, and then that's what you do. So it's people were really taken by that, and then of course that draws people in, and that's I think the Buddha, it's a foundation that allows one to draw close, and that's important, so that anybody can be generous, and anybody can be giving, and that gives like, you're not trying to set up conditions for, you've got to give this or you've got to give that. It's got to be like this. It's got to be like that. That starts limiting people immediately, and it's sort of. Yeah, as Jitsu was saying, you give where your heart has some faith and confidence, and where you feel it's going to be made use of, and so that it's a beautiful tradition that has sustained not just the monasteries, but the whole fabric, the warp and weft of a culture. In Buddhist cultures, they're held together by generosity and sila. It's important to recognize, but usually the doorway into sila is a bit harder, a bit higher. Like, you actually got to keep some precepts. And that's hard for some people. But they can be generous. I mean, I've seen that in Thailand so often. There's people I know who lead, not very skillful lives, on sila level, but they can be generous, so that at least maintains that kind of contact, and it opens up a door. And I know, I know of one person in particular. I mean, this is really extreme. I mean, he was always supportive of the, of good causes and whatnot. But he was basically he was a head of a kind of a mafia that controlled a fishing port, and he did some pretty awful things. And then he ended up, he couldn't hold that juxtaposition any longer, and came to Ajahn Chah. It was really sweet. He ended up, Ajahn Chah had him stay below his kuti, and stayed there for about a week and helped looked after, like attending to Ajahn Chah and following him around, helping him out. And then he was, there's this very strong faith and commitment to sila, which was hard for him to explain to his gang. But he did. It was until the end of his life, which he knew was going to be short, just because of how he had lived before. But he felt that it was really worth it. But the doorway was generosity. So it's or I think of the Jittasubha has experienced it, of when the Ajahn Chah memorial ceremonies go on for the recollection of Ajahn Chah, which is a period of practice, usually about a week. It's in January, around the time of his death, and thousands of people come to the monastery, and usually staying in the monastery, there's usually well over 1,000, so 1,500, usually 500, 600, 700 monks. During the actual funeral ceremonies of Ajahn Chah, there was over 10,000 lay people staying in the monastery. Wow. About 6,000 monks, about 1,000 nuns. It was, and all of that was on a daily basis dana. And all sorts of people came, because it takes some organizing. But the thing is, once you walked into the gates, and of the monastery, the cash economy of the outside world completely falls away, and it really is an economy of gifts. So that there's usually books and literature available, teachings are being given on a regular basis, people are practicing together, and then there's a whole area out the front which is kitchens, that people come from all the different branch monasteries of Wat Pah Pong, and they'll set up kitchens to look after all the visitors and the monastic sangha. And I remember when I was very much involved in the organization of Ajahn Chah's funeral ceremonies, and we were talking with myself and a few of the other senior monks, and I said, well, you've got all these people coming. It'd just be simpler to have everybody keep the 8 precepts, and just the kitchens can be there to look after everybody in the morning. And so we kind of sent out a kind of word and notice to all the different kitchens that were starting to set up. And it didn't take very long, and there was a whole delegation of the kitchens come and said, Ajahns, no. People are going to be coming day and night. When they arrive, they need to be fed. And sort of, okay, and that was sort of, well, yeah, we better back off. That was, it was just, that was a very, very clear line. There's no, you want to look after everybody who comes. It's not. So it wasn't, it was just, so there's a beauty that comes from this quality of generosity. And there's a delight that comes. And it's really important to see it not as a one-off thing, but as something that nourishes and nurtures one's life and one's practice. Because it's the nurturing of, and the same, I mentioned it in the Q&A session of, I think, in the mentioning sort of like merit or punya. The punya is another word for happiness. The happiness that arises from doing that which is good, that which is right, that which is true. And that's what supports our kind of a brightness of heart, brightness of mind. And it's through that kind of brightness of mind, like there's a discourse, actually there's many discourses, where the Buddha goes through the sort of the different causes and conditions of growth in the practice, in the training. And some start with, like with dana, others with sila, or from the kusala sila, or kusala, the really wholesome, beautiful conduct. Sometimes the starting point is wise reflection. Sometimes it's hearing the Dhamma. But what it does is there's these various starting points, but then it goes into a stock phrases of, with such and such as condition, there is the arising of delight, of pamoja. And with with pamoja as the condition, there's the arising of joy, piti. And with joy as the condition, there's the arising of tranquility. There's just this kind of relaxing, settling ease that comes with tranquility as the condition. There's the arising of happiness, sukha. And then with happiness as a condition, there's the arising of samadhi. And of course this is, and there's some of those discourses the Buddha will actually stop and say, the happy mind is easily concentrated. There's a happy mind that easily establishes itself in samadhi. And it's to me it's such a revelation from my own cultural background, because I say, I spent so much of my early years of practice, it's like, when I get my samadhi together, I'm going to be happy. And that's exactly the opposite of how the Buddha approaches it. It's like when you get your happiness together, then your mind will really settle down and become still. And it's just so important. And of course these are all, this is a really wholesome forms of happiness, not the happiness of gratification or great stimulation in any way. It's in those various virtues and skills of living a good life. And generosity is one of them. But keeping precept, listening to Dhamma, sharing in different ways, whatever is a doorway into this wholesome punya, a meritorious action, along with the skillful, wise reflection is another. Yoniso manasikara. It's a really important skill to be able to reflect, to investigate, to see things clearly, to take it into account, take things into account. And it's from that point that the Buddha then said, with samadhi as the condition, then there's knowledge and vision of the way things truly are. And it's when the mind becomes clear and steady and still, then one quite naturally starts to see things in their true nature. And then it's in that seeing things in their true nature that there is nibbida, which is disenchantment is a good word. I know Bhikkhu Bodhi's translated it as disgust, but which actually does have a good etymological root, because the root of disgust is to lose the flavor for it, like gust as in gustatory. And so that disgust is to lose the flavor. So one's losing, there's a disenchantment, a turning away from the world. The world just loses its flavor. But that losing that flavor is not because you're depressed and fed up. That's because you're full. Your heart is full with happiness and well-being. And it's really important to see what do we have to look after? What do we need to be taken care of? And of course, generosity plays a role. I mean, there's nothing that is in the Buddha's path that ever stands out on its own. Okay, this is, whenever you hear some teacher sort of say, this is the one way of practice, or this is the one thing you have to, I would get away quickly. Because it's just not the way that reality works. I mean, this is a really kind of a tightly knit web of causal conditions, and we have to figure out what these various causes and conditions are. And it's like I remember Ajahn Chah one time saying, you think with the Dhamma, you've got to be ready to pick up everything. He said it isn't as if you're just going to go and, okay, I just want the corner of this, but the whole thing comes along with it. And that's what happens with the Dhamma. That's generosity, dana, sila, bhavana. These all fit together. The generosity, virtue, mental development. These all work together. The Eightfold Path it all works together. It's not that there's just one thing. If you're just mindful, it's all going to work. You have to figure out how to implement the rest of this path and how to live with the path. So but that sense of reflecting carefully, and that's why I say, like, in terms of investigation, this anicca dukkha anatta is the heart of it. That sense of the impermanence, inconstancy, uncertainty of everything, the unsatisfactory nature of everything, the not self nature of things. These are fundamental truths of existence that when we investigate them and pay attention, this is how things truly are. And when we do, there is a disenchantment that comes when we see things in that light, and again, not as a pushing away, but a realization of its limitation, and to a certain degree, that's really a catalyst for compassion and kindness, because things can never be what you want them to be. They are what they are. And some things are good and some things aren't so good, but they are what they are, and they can't be anything other than that. And there's a compassion that's there, and because we all live within these conditions, the limitation of this physical form, this human form, this mind that is so hopelessly unreliable, and it can be transformed, and it can be seen through. And so that contemplation of that returning to that contemplation of the, just the impermanence of things, and that's one of the, Ajahn Jeff translates it as inconstancy, which is kind of, it's not just a semantic a difference. Impermanent has this sense, okay, there's this arising and ceasing all the time, which is not untrue. Just this change that's taking place all the time. And inconstancy has the sense of it, because for something to be constant, then it needs to be stable, steady, reliable, and inconstancy and conditions, mental, physical, internal, external conditions can never be completely reliable. And there's always something from left field coming in, and so you have to be ready for that. There's also where Ajahn Chah sometimes he would speak of anicca as rather than impermanence or change, he would speak of it as uncertain, unsure, and that sense of, because when you start, there's a kind of emotional effect that is really important to pay attention to, because that impermanence or even inconstancy, it's still an object out there. But whereas when we pay attention to the uncertainty, it's how we feel about it. And so it's in here. And it's really important to take that in as a part of the big picture, and reflecting on the impermanence of it. And of course we reflect on the impermanence of conditions out in the world, but in particular, the impermanence or the uncertainty of this mind and this body, because this is where we experience the world. And that the world is, and when we say the world is unsatisfactory, is this how we experience the world, how we. There's this a teaching of the Buddha's when he's asked, the world, what is the world? And the Buddha's, that whereby one perceives the world and conceives of the world, that is the world. And so it's really important. We're creating the world right here. And we can live in a generous, kind world. We can live in a world with integrity. It doesn't mean we have to be stupid. but it's, you look after what needs to be looked after appropriately. But you're making choices, and it's like, I think in particular that tendency to be swayed by the fear and negativity of the world around us is really potent, and one has to be conscious in directing attention away from that, because it just pulls one in so easily, so quickly. So it's and that's the way things are. So it's just, you have to live with that with wisdom. The sense of dukkha, just really seeing seeing the unsatisfactory nature of things. Things aren't able to satisfy. There's a certain burden that we pick up in expecting to be gratified and satisfied, and hoping that this is going to do the trick. And of course it doesn't do it. But then, there's always something else. But you can only live so long, and it's just, I've got to figure this out. I've got to find a solution within my own heart. But that sense of, there is dukkha, there is suffering. It is very real. And then the suffering of the world and the suffering of our own feeling towards it. But it's important to recognize that it's something that we are picking up as well. It's not that you shut things out, or you kind of try to whitewash it all with kind of the brush of pastels and pinks. But you recognize that it's like Ajahn Chah once, in the front of the ordination hall at Ajahn Chah's monastery, there's a bunch of ancient stone boundary markers and some of them are probably 1,000 years old anyway. They're big boundary markers for marking the boundary for these buildings where acts of the Sangha are done. And it's a tradition that's from the time of the Buddha. And so somebody had offered, they were down along the border between Thailand and Cambodia. Somebody offered them to, I think the military offered them to Lumpur Cha. So he came and his were already in place, but he used it more as a kind of a decoration, or just to be able for people to see these ancient, but they're big. And there was one time I was walking with a monk who who was suffering, and kind of out of the like almost as a non sequitur, are those stones over there, are those heavy or not heavy? And of course I'm like, those are big stones. Those are heavy, he said. And Ajahn Chah says, They're not if you don't pick them up. And it's a simple truth that is, in terms of our relationship to dukkha. We can recognize something as suffering. We can recognize that something is heavy. We can recognize that something is difficult. But how much are we going to commit to picking it up? We don't have to, really. Or we can be skillful in how we do that. And so that relationship to dukkha is really important to establish. One recognizes the complete and total unsatisfactory nature of things, but that's not a negation of the reality of, say, of happiness and well-being. It's actually seen more clearly as one is happy, and as in the description of that progression of refinement of the heart that necessarily needs to take place for the mind to experience that well-being and happiness, and to settle into stillness, to see things in their true nature, to internalize that, and to be disenchanted with it. But the disenchantment is coming from, wow, I don't have to pick that up. I don't have to carry it anymore. Wow, what a relief. That's fantastic. And there's even more happiness with that. So it's an important aspect of this practice. You want to go to the difficult places to really understand it, to really see it clearly. But you don't want to entangle yourself in the messiness of your mind too much. And you want to, if you always come back and build a foundation of well-being and stability. It's just so important to approach things with that base, with that foundation. Not self, of course, is the anatta teaching of the Buddhas. It's really important to recognize that the anatta teaching of the Buddhas is a middle way teaching, in the sense that the extreme of atta, of self, this is me, this is mine, this is what I am, and the other extreme of nirata, which is there's nothing here. That's a nihilistic holding of self, where it shouldn't be this way. I don't want it to be. Trying to annihilate self. Those are extremes, and the anatta is your balanced way through, recognizing for whatever I perceive as me can't possibly be, because of its impermanence, because of its unsatisfactory nature. It is a phenomena. It can't be held to as truly what I am, what is me, what is mine. It also is a impermanent, unstable, unsatisfying aspect of nature. So it's so being able to reflect on things from this balance point of not self is you're not trying to get rid of self, and that's actually in the teaching where the Buddha points to the different forms of upadana, of grasping, clinging, of attachment. There's gam upadana, attachment, clinging to sensuality. The dit upadana, the attachment, clinging to views and opinions, taking stances all the time. Silabbata upadana, attachment and clinging to the thinking that purification comes through precept or practice. If I just meditate these amount of hours a day, or I keep these precepts and somehow I'm going to be purified. I do this special practice and this is going to do it. But the last form of clinging and attachment that the Buddha points to is what's called attavadupadana. And it's the clinging to the doctrine of self, clinging to the assumption of self. It's not attaupadana. It's not, because there isn't a self to begin with. So you can't really cling to something that doesn't exist. But what we do cling to is the assumption or the belief in self. The teaching about, because there are all sorts of teachings out there that religious and spiritual ones that kind of reify the self. And the Buddhists are, no, that's kind of empty. And that's not a problem, because that's exactly the way things are in nature. So that the more we are able to align ourselves with the way things truly are, then the happier and clearer and more peaceful we are. So it's just using this practice to really, when we lay down the roots of the good solid foundations, but you keep developing the refinements of this skillfulness. That's really what wisdom is. So anyway, that's some reflections for anyway. 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 That's some reflections